This is the weekly wrap-up, the wrap-up of news stories we posted all week long on the Conversation Project's feeds on Facebook and Twitter, and that we talked about most of them throughout the week in the Things You Might Have Heard daily podcast, video cast, where 5 days a week, every single weekday morning, we give you the latest in news to get your day started from our perspective, as is your perspective. We allow you do most of the heavy lifting, telling us what stories are the most conversational from a swath of stories we post all day long, all night long, from your engagement, giving us what you do. Now, on the daily shows, Things You Might Have Heard, we'll go through and give you the top half of stories, 15 of the top 30 stories, or 30 of the top 100 stories of the weekend, and then we'll pick from those 10 from the 30 and 8 from the 15, so we have a more concise newscast. What we have at the end of the week is some stories don't get picked because they just don't get picked, and so we give you a wrap-up of the stories that, per the actual numbers, per your actual engagement, were the top stories. So if people want an insight of what actually was the top story of the week, or what story did I like that they didn't get to because I chose this shark story over the clown story, this is where you get it right here. We're going to provide for you right now 10 stories from 10 to 1, counting them down, backwards, Casey Kasem style, to tell you which stories were the most conversational based literally on your actual engagement. Some stories we did not talk about, and we'll explain some of those in a bit. Some stories were very, very big and very powerful, so we could not ignore them. We also will give you the also ran, stories that were close, not quite there. Top 11 through 15 stories of the week that were in the range, near the range, close to range, but not top 10 materials. Some of these stories we actually did talk about because they were higher stories. And we'll give you the story at the very, 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 get two more, very, very bottom of the list. The almost irrelevant story of the week. This story is number 217 for this week. 217 distinct different postings over the week. And this one got the least amount of love, which is an oxymoron, but you get the point. We're also going to, it's a podcast and it's a newscast, so we will talk about our sponsor today. Our big sponsor today is Blinkist, for people who are looking for getting quick news, get quick books as well, and we'll promote what we do all week long with the Conversation Project. But the big thing is getting in these news stories that you actually chose to talk about, because you are the most important thing to this, to help them pick stories. To make sure you are picking the stories, and we are picking the best stories, go to our feeds on Facebook and Twitter, facebook.com/This Is a Conversation Project, and twitter.com/th_conversation. When you get there, you will see we're posting news stories about every 50 minutes or so throughout the day, all night. As you see news stories that are interesting to you, or something that you really, really maybe hate, it goes both ways, love and hate. Engage with it. Just do the natural like, love, hate, share thing with them. And comments there as well are great as well. And the more comments, more engagement, more love you give to a story, or hate in some cases, better chance we have of talking about it every single weekday in Things You Might Not Have Heard, and the better chance it shows up here in the top 10 for the weekly wrap-up. So let's get into the wrap-up right now, going with 10 stories, counting them down, Casey Kasem style, from 10 to 1, to give you the stories that you said by pure numbers, by pure force of will, were the top stories of the week. This first story we're talking about today is story number 10. The headline reads, "Hail hurts dozens of concert goers, scraps Louis Tomlinson's show at Red Rocks Amphitheater near Denver." This was a story that popped my attention because it was just out there, and you guys caught the attention of it as well. In fact, it was posted on Friday the 23rd, so all the way back at the beginning of the week, or the weekend if you will, and it survived all the way here to make it a top 10 story. We unfortunately did not talk about it because I think there was a war in Ukraine or Russia or something like that sort of got in the way, so we pushed this down for other stories. What happened in this one was, it's meaning 90 people were treated for injuries from a storm that happened really last week in the Red Rocks venue out in the middle of the desert in the Rocky Mountains. 7 people were taken to the hospital with no injuries, life-threatening, going there. People were trying to escape the venue because it's literally a canyon in the middle of no place that once you're out there, there is no way to get out. It was a spectacle to see, and a very bunch of spectacle for people who lived through it. Well, basically everybody lived through it, but there are many people, musicians and fans alike, who were in the theater from around the world looking at this great, beautiful venue. It's literally a cavern that's with some carved out amphitheater seats, so you can sit in there and listen to the natural sounds and echoes. And when storms come in, when it gets really dangerous, it apparently gets really, really dangerous. We are glad there were no injuries in this one. We wish we could have had a chance to talk more about this one during the week, but there were some other big stories, and we'll hear about some of those as we go deeper into this countdown, going to one. And some of the also-rans are also some pretty big things as well. We have a lot of stories where the initial story we posted does not do justice to the updates, and some of them didn't warrant posting the updates because they weren't massively big, but we got details on them. Some of them were just the fact that as you got more details of them, they just really fleshed out the details. When you know more what you know, it's more easier to talk about. Number 9 is an example. Train derailment on Montana Bridge sends multiple rail cars into Yellowstone River. While this happened very much late in last week or inside the weekend for the early part of the weekend for this week, right now, I still don't believe they have a full accounting of what caused the derailment, what actually caused the bridge to fail, although we have a lot of failing bridges, so there's probably something into that. The biggest thing about this one, the Montana Rail Link train derailed and several tanker cars were damaged and leaked some petroleum products. That's what it said here. Those products weren't so much petroleum, but molten sulfate and molten rock and things like that. The biggest thing about what happened was most of the stuff was hot, liquid metal and things like that. So once it touched the air, it essentially solidified and was not an issue to people in the area. It did not so much get in the river. There was some sort of chemicals that were on there as well that did not get into the river, as far as we know, as far as reported. So there was no serious danger to the locals and the people using that water supply fairly soon after it was done. But there was plenty of cleanup and plenty of questions, and I'm not sure how long you're taking to get that one fixed, because that's a pretty major train line for getting supplies back and forth by rail. We'll see how long it takes to get that back to speed. At number 8, we have the initial headline we posted. We posted some supplemental points on this as it continued, essentially one for every single day since it's going on for every single day. The initial post happening on Wednesday, the 28th, gave us this one. Violent protests in Paris suburb after teen is shot dead by police during traffic stop. This we pulled from Sky News. This took a little while to develop because it was more or less overnight in Paris. But as things continued, trust me, things continued. Many people speaking out about the incident where a black teen was shot by a police officer during traffic stop for failing to yield. It sounds really familiar to folks here in the United States because it's something that happened a whole lot of years back, and it's something that still is kind of buries in the mind of people of quote unquote my complexion. I am black, so it's something that when these stories pop up, yes, I pay attention, and other folks should as well. The family's lawyers have been talking about this the whole time. And what's happened, essentially, there have been protests and violent protests and riots basically ever since this happened. So this is, I believe, day 4 or 5 of incidents, and the violence and the outrage has just gotten worse and worse. The president has tried to speak out and try to calm his nation, having some meetings with people to try to get a handle on the outrage and the anger that's going out there, not quite working out so well. The mother of the young man killed has speaking publicly and trying to do her best to quell some of the violence and some of the anger, saying that she's not anti-police. She doesn't want all this going on. Her son would not want this. She just needs the person that was responsible, the one police officer dealt with. That police officer was essentially put on leave immediately, and we're probably going to see very serious charges come against him. We'll see how well the French justice system does with things like this. As we've seen in the past, the American justice system is a little, 50-50 in some cases. Madonna has found her way into the news for not the greatest things lately. The biggest thing lately had been the fact that for some reason Madonna and Roseanne Barr, Roseanne Barr has somehow gotten prettier, but Madonna's work has made her look a little funky and weird with her face all puffy. This is another one of those things where it should have been a good start, but unfortunately the bad start is why we're talking about her. The number 7 headline this week is Madonna postpones tour after being hospitalized for serious bacterial infection. Manager says full recovery expected. We posted this on Wednesday, and so what basically happened was over the weekend, of Saturday I believe, she was checked into the hospital with a serious bacterial infection. that's a big thing. And because she had a tour that's starting essentially this week, she had to let people know the tour is going to be delayed. It's just the fact of life. She is recovering well. Amanda says everything is good. Nothing serious as in life-threatening for the most part. But once they got her into the hospital, she was taken care of. She's in ICU. She's still in hospital right now as everything's being taken care of to make sure she is safe and healthy. The real casualty of this event is the bigger event. It's kicking off in July in Vancouver, which is now July, and then ending in December in Amsterdam. The world tour is not going to happen quite yet. Tickets will be postponed. Maybe some dates get cut. Maybe they just push the whole thing back and just shoot forward. We won't see until we can see Madonna back on stage, which should be soon, but not soon enough to start the tour on time. This week, we suffered a lot of tragedy, a lot of deep, dark stories, and this just happens to be one of them. This one has a bit of a local flavor here to me because this person was beloved here in the state of Arkansas and up in Missouri where he's from. And it's just a sad, just randomish incident that because it happens, we're now talking about it. Former NFL quarterback Ryan Mallett dies in drowning accident, the number 6 story for this week. We pulled this news on Tuesday, the 27th, where Ryan Mallett died on Tuesday, drowning in Florida. They suspect, there's no real proof was going on that riptides out in the area, because they've been so strong, have been an issue there. He was celebrated by the fans who knew him in Michigan and at Arkansas in college. Also the fans who followed him in the pros, where he started off as a Patriot, ended off as a Raven. I think he played for the Houston Texans for a bit as well. A lot of people celebrating the love of Ryan Mallett. Now, Ryan Mallett, as a football player, became kind of a meme-ish player for just not exactly being the sharpest bulb, if you will, in some cases. And I took some shots at him as well during my time doing sports radio. But this is something that you don't want to have. He's taken on a second life, or maybe even third life, if you will, as a high school quarterbacks coach, and is doing great with the work with the kids. So that was something that was good. And so the Whitehall school district, where he's basically helping out to coach kids, is celebrating him as well as his coach and educator. And we are all celebrating him as just a person. Generally a nice person. His quarterbacking skills were kind of suspect at sometimes, but as the accident went down, as we said, we don't really know exactly what happened, how exactly it happened. The reasoning given is essentially riptides around the area in Florida, which a lot of people, a lot of beaches have been closed down because of that. We'll hopefully get more from the incident as it goes deep down the line, but this is a sad story that really hits here locally where I live. And just kind of the general population of one of those things where you never really know what happens. This is one of those things that you need to make sure you're good with your safety and your swimming ability if you're going to go swimming in the ocean. This other story beat out the previous story at number 6 by the engagement by like maybe 4 or 5. They were number 2, 1 and 2 with a large engagement of about 20% each on the day we posted them on Wednesday. Posted officially on Tuesday, or they were talked about on Wednesday, posted officially on Tuesday, also the 27th. Jimmie Johnson's in-laws dead. NASCAR star wife Chandra's mother, Terry, believed to be the shooter. The very, very short version of this, because this gets really gruesome quickly. You can go to the link that we have in the description and get the updated news for this, or search for it on your own. Jimmie Johnson, the NASCAR driver, had an incident with his in-laws. His wife, Chandra, her parents and their 11-year-old grandson were found dead in their home. It is believed that to be a murder-suicide, and that Chandra's mother, Terry, was the shooter in the incident. How they heard about it: 911 call was given to police that said someone had a gun, and then someone hung up, and then they found this subject laying in the hallway inside the front door, determined that she was deceased, also finding the other 2 subjects as well. Traumatizing incident for the town where it happened. Traumatizing incident for everyone involved in seeing this one. This is another one of those things that we did not really want to be a part of, but because it just got so much attention, it was so there. It's one of the things about fame and fortune. When you're famous, people care about some of the deeper things that happen. This would have been a tragic story regardless, but the fact that it would happen to a sports star, it makes it that much more salacious, that much more interesting, as in people are interested. And essentially, that's a little more sad. We don't know the full details of what happened with what went down, what was going on. But this was a case where we took the time this week to remind folks of how they can get help if they're in sort of need. We tell people about the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline way too often than we need to, I think. Well, we want to, I should say. Apparently, we need to do it more. You can call or text 988 on your cell phone and get someone from the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 24 hours a day, and people will speak to you in English and Spanish to help you talk through whatever issues you're having. If you want to get some other type of help, go to their website, 988lifeline.org, and you can see other resources there. Find a local resource if you want to. Find a friend to talk to, because whatever the outcome could be, it could be better, much better than what we had the outcome here. We're definitely sending positive thoughts and all the love we can towards the people involved, especially the initial family, Jimmie Johnson and his wife, and their children dealing with this issue here. There are over 300 names on this letter, but somehow Jennifer Lawrence got the top billing, maybe because she has a movie coming out this week, and so it sort of picked things up. The headline for number 4 story is, Jennifer Lawrence, A-list actors threatened to strike in letter to SAG. The Screen Actors Guild voted to authorize a strike if their negotiation committee doesn't reach an agreement with major Hollywood studios by June 30th, which was, of course, yesterday. I believe they have an extension for that. I don't think I saw any strike news this morning as I'm recording this on Saturday morning, the 1st. But we shall see what happens. They still have the right to strike or voted to strike if negotiations don't get better. 300 actors signed the letter, and Jennifer Lawrence is the top billing for the headline. Some of those other big ones include Meryl Streep, Rami Malek, Quinta Brunson, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, always have trouble with her, Ben Stiller, Neil Patrick Harris, Amy Schumer, and Amy Poehler. Like I said, 300 actors signed this, and many of those actors are names just as familiar as those there. Right now, the letter is saying to prepare to strike if it comes to that. They are essentially joining in arms with the writers who are currently on strike because there's a lot of issues to go with. The biggest issues the writers are writing about are AI killing the fact that if they use more AI, they need less writers. They're also not getting paid as much because the way TV works, or whatever you want to call it these days, they're not getting the normal TV contracts, but the streaming services and the way they work aren't paying the same things. The same sort of general things are in place for the actors, as there is less work for them to do as CGI is coming in and taking things over. Now you can digitally put a face on people. You can digitally put a voice on people. You can pay them less because the way things work in royalties don't work the same way. And so they're making sure that they're getting their get right now as well, along with some solidarity with the actual writers who are really getting screwed in the process. The ironic part of covering story number 3 is that we had 2 headlines, and the headline we actually dealt with was the second. This is the initial one, and this one had the most actual engagement power. So we're going to give you this headline and explain some of the actual updates to this one. We did talk about this second one. We tried not to talk about the first one. We had to go to the second one because mostly for the same reason we talked about the triple murder-suicide story. Worker dead after being ingested into plane engine at San Antonio airport. So a worker essentially was literally sucked into a plane engine in the San Antonio International Airport on Friday, and it was very extremely disturbing. What makes it even more disturbing? Number one, the fact that this is the second incident in about 6 months as a ground worker in Montgomery Airport had the same thing happen, ingested into the plane engine on the tarmac. Number two, this incident, after the coroner went through all the details, has been ruled as suicide. So as we said earlier, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988 is there for you. And so we weren't going to go back through that one again, but we want to just kind of go through the deal of this one. This was a story that seemed pretty sensational. We posted up there and it did make numbers. But as we said, we were trying to deal with some more serious natures of the Russian not-so-coup that happened over the weekend. So we did not put this one up for discussion with this original headline. We did do the update because it was something that needed to be said, we believe, going through our news notes. And speaking of that coup and our news notes, that's a story that reached the second highest engagement of the week. This headline, which kicked things off, Wagner leader calls for rebellion against Russian defense chief. Kremlin orders his arrest. Now, part of the reason why this one gets the most is because this story played itself out between Saturday morning for our purposes. We didn't get anything posted till we woke up Saturday to see the deals. And then Sunday afternoon, on our points where it was basically over. And then come Monday, we just talked rumor and innuendo. But what happened initially, come Friday evening, Saturday morning, our time, essentially, was the leader of the Wagner group decided that he was just sick and tired of Russia screwing up and not being good at running the war. So he decided he was going to run the war himself, apparently. So he rolled his troops off the front line and went to the city at the base of Russia, basically right there at the Ukrainian border, and just took it over. They rolled in and said, we're in charge, and the Russian folks are like, okay. And the people are like, cool, okay. And so they spent, a day, maybe, just sort of running around, dressing down Russian officers, seeing what was going on. They may have shot down 2 helicopters that might have put up with the defense, but other than that, it wasn't very much of the defense. It just sort of happened. Then Putin said, this is an abomination. You're a traitor. I'm going to arrest you. And somehow, some way, a deal was made about 8 hours later for the leader, Prigozhin, whose name I've been butchering all week, to leave Russia, go to Belarus for some reason, and take a couple dozen hundred soldiers with him. And then all the soldiers in the Wagner group who decided to be a part of this coup, and the ones that didn't, they were just on the front line saying, I wasn't part of this, they get a chance to join the Russian army, which seems like an even worse fate, but it is what it is. This whole thing was so bonkers crazy, and every single pundit took this over. This was literally all that was talked about on the headline news stations, the mainstream media stations, all weekend long. Everything was scrapped for this thing here. It was that important because it seemed like Putin was going to be overthrown, and then he wasn't. And then we had to kind of deal with the aftermath of what's going on. And it was lucky that we dealt with it fairly early because there were a lot more cases, a lot more things going on to be dealt with that are going to ripple in here throughout the rest of the week. We talked about a lot of Supreme Court talk that happened on Friday. None of it here because it didn't have enough time to earn the votes, if you will. But we will have a lot of that stuff going forward. And it really would have been weird not being able to talk about that if we were still talking about the Russian coup. We've now reached the point to the number one story of the week. Once again, it's a tragic story, so the fanfare I'd like to put on this does seem a bit overmuch, but we're going to tell you stat-wise how it turned out. This story itself was posted on Sunday the 25th, and even though there was the Russian stuff going on, at least for people on the internet seeing the story, it garnered 16.32% of all the engagement of all the stories this week. Of all 217 stories, it took 16%. It was the top story, obviously, for the Twitter, because Twitter's where things they picked up. And it is more responsive from the last story, the one about the Russian coup that did not coup up, by 132%. It was more responsive by the story at the very, very, very bottom. That's the 217th story by, let me make sure I got this right, 204,900%. That's how much more engaging this story was to the one at the very bottom. And the one at the very bottom, when we get to, it's kind of tragic, so we'll just get to that when we get there. The headline for this one reads like this. Gröna Lund, rollercoaster accident in Sweden leaves one dead. And we're going to wrap up pretty quickly on this one for time-wise and for story-wise. But a rollercoaster accident at the amusement park in Sweden killed one person and injured 9 in the incident. 3 injured were believed to be severely wounded and receiving treatment in a nearby hospital. That was as the story went down. Sweden's oldest park, which is called Gröna Lund, will be closed for the week, so it's still closed out while police are working to do the investigation on the roller coaster and any other rides that are safe. So all people who bought tickets for this were refunded. We pulled this from the BBC, so it was a fairly blunted and kind of a low-toned type of article, but it did pop up in the middle of the Russian coup stuff, and we did post the article around the same time we posted about the train. So we actually covered this one because they were related. The roller coaster incident and the train incident were both covered on Monday morning as a podcast, videocast for things you might have heard. Not a lot to go into this one, so we're not going to go deeper into this one on purpose. We're going to leave it as it is and just kind of transition on to the rest of the program. So this is the part where we're going to take a pause and do our commercial break. We'll talk about our sponsor in a moment. We'll do a little bit of promotion for the Conversation Project. We'll take care of that in the middle. And then we'll wrap things up with the stories that didn't quite make it. Those are 11 through 15. Call them the also rans. They almost rans. They didn't quite rans, if you will. Not quite in the range, but close. And then we'll tell you the story at 217, the almost irrelevant story of the week. It is irrelevant because no one cared about it, but the almost part is it's usually a fairly important story that just gets lost in the mix. And this one, kind of a big one, kind of a bummer, but something that is on the minds of a lot of people. It just did not get the concentration for this week. So we'll get to that in mere moments when we get back from this quick break. This is the weekly wrap-up with Jay Cleveland Payne, that's me, from the Conversation Project. Brought more news in a moment. I was a proud user of the Blinkist app before it became one of our sponsors, our affiliate sponsors for the Conversation Project, and it is a miracle worker, if you will. As a fan of the author Robert Greene, who writes books like The Art of Seduction, and those books tend to be 19 hours long on audio, so expect how much you can read it if you're a slow reader like I am. Something like Blinkist has been a lifesaver for getting books like that down my hatchet. What Blinkist does, it takes the pure facts, the big points of all big books, major books that are nonfiction and autobiographies, and gives them to you in blinks, literally short little pieces you can digest in small doses. So a normal book that's a nonfiction book that may take you a couple hours to read will only take you about 15 minutes to read, and that's either via reading the blinks themselves, to read them in out loud with your eyeballs, or using your earballs to listen to them in audio form. Now, a book like Robert Greene's won't be done in 15 minutes, but you can probably get that in some cases. Some of them go really, really long. In most cases, the longer books will get broken down to at least 35 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes. Mileage may vary on whatever you're looking for. It's a great way to get more books in. As a person with not a lot of time, but a big love of knowledge and reading, Blinkist saves me a lot of time and keeps me sane in a lot of cases. You can also join in the fun with other folks who also love reading and save some money with it. If you hold a Blinkist subscription, you can make Blinkist groups and bring people in for people who don't actually own the app, and they can be a part of the show and they can get in for all of the books love that you get in the short versions. So check out Blinkist today and get in on all the great reading that you've been missing out on, because I know you're missing out on it. You're listening to a podcast that deals with giving you quick information for the news every day. So I'm sure you do want to read more books as well. Go to our link for our affiliates. This is theconversationproject.com/Blinkist. This is theconversationproject.com/Blinkist. That's spelled BLINKIST. This is theconversationproject.com/Blinkist. And check them out today. Once you sign up for it, you'll get 7-day free trial to see what you love about it. And once you love it, you will definitely want to get in on the action here. Check it out. This will save you a lot of time and help you out with your knowledge. It is the Blinkist app. Monday through Friday, we give you things you might not have heard. It is a newscast of video and podcast audio that gives you stories from the prior day, or for Monday, the prior weekend, to get you started with what stories are the most conversational. Good stories, best stories, most engaging stories, and you guys tell us what to do to get those stories. Literally, you go to our feeds at facebook.com and twitter.com, and you let us know what stories are there. We'll go back in the feeds in a minute because we've said that a few times, so we'll do it again at the end of the show. But what we really need from you is more engagement in what we're doing, just in the overall business part of things. We ask of you to check out our sponsors. That's there. We ask of you to check out our partnerships page. And if you want to help us get things done, you can partner with us directly to help us do that. But we really are asking you today to comment, to give us some feedback, tell us what's going on. We've done a lot of things, a lot of changes based on a lot of factors. One great factor is having to move and rebuild a studio from my home studio, which is currently being rebuilt from a tornado. So that's not exactly fun. And other things as well. Plus some technology things and some things that have been trendy things, and me being jealous of other YouTubers and video creators and doing some things on those end. We need to know how well we're doing. And we're going to put out a survey for you to look out for coming soon. So look down the pipeline for links and QR codes and stuff for the actual survey. But in the meantime, your emails help great. Email the show at theconversationinbox@gmail.com, or email me directly at the letter J, Cleveland like the city, PAYNE @gmail.com. And we can discuss what you want to discuss too. The stories I'm not covering, the stories I should be covering, which are basically the same thing, and what I'm talking about that I should stop covering. There you go. We can talk about all those things as well. If you just need someone to chat about, I'm here as well. I do other things under a larger brand, including I just put out a book that we talked about last week for my business promotion brand. And so if you need some help with your business stuff, hey, we can chat up as well. But most importantly, because this is what this is about, the news, we need details on the news. Check out our sponsors page and see if there's a sponsor that can help you out. Check out our partnerships page and see if there's a way that you can help us out. But most importantly, follow us in the feeds, share the products, and of course, talk to us about it. Tell us what's going on and what we can do to fix or sometimes unfix. And now for the stories that you kind of loved, but not quite loved enough. There are links to these stories in the show notes for the show, or description in where you're getting this coming through. So make sure you get a chance to go through those links, visit these stories in deeper detail if you want to, and kind of get some context of what stories were close, but not quite in the full range for top 10. Starting off at number 11, Bam Margera leaves detox early, heading to Los Angeles. We actually talked this one up for a little bit because Bam Margera has been something that has somehow popped up a lot for you guys in these stories. Not sure why he is such a, I won't say polarizing, he's such a important figure for folks in the conversation land, but you guys care a lot about Bam Margera's story, so we gave you the details on him leaving detox early and headed back to Vegas. The Fisher Island ferry incident leaves Port of Miami temporarily closed. Very quick incident on that one. You can go deeper to that detail on that one. Story number 12 for the week we have. And number 13, we did not get a chance to talk about this one, but I saw it and it was let's see what happens. It scored fairly well, but did not actually garner much in the way of, a Russian war and everything. Pedro Pascal condemns butthurt filmgoers who complain about race swapping. Essentially, a lot of new movies are doing their best to do diversity by swapping races, swapping genders with characters, and making them work in a new way, as if they were, a new creation, if you will. A lot of people who are, married to the source material, who really just sort of just racist and dumb, are complaining about it. And he's a guy who can complain about it because everybody loves Pedro Pascal. Number 14, University of Idaho murders. State seeks death penalty against Bryan Kohberger. We went deep into this one, of course, as state decided they're going to go hard to Bryan Kohberger's case and try to get death penalty for him. The family members of the victims are extremely happy about that. And here's a story that we posted, and we didn't think we'd have a chance to really get into, but this is history, and this was pretty cool. Number 15, New York Yankees pitcher Domingo Germán throws 24th perfect game in MLB history. And so he did it on Wednesday, and so we posted it on Thursday morning. He's the fourth Yankee to actually do that over time. Of course, the most famous being Don Larson doing it in the World Series. But of 24 perfect games, the Yankees have 4 of them. I think you can call them a pretty good team. Let's get to the final story and wrap this thing up with a bow. At number 217, we told you this story was not very engaging. We told you the story only was as engaging from the top story by about 204,000 plus 900%. The engagement rate of that one barely to register. The headline for this may have you scratch your heads about, what's going on and why no one really catered to this one. California homelessness crisis is homegrown. Unhoused are Californians. Very, very quickly into this is this fact that we're seeing issues in a lot of places across the nation where homelessness is a problem, which is a problem. But a lot of people that are homeless where you may be tend to be people who have migrated from one place and are just searching for some place to go and somehow end up somewhere else, try that place for a while and end up somewhere else. Some of the issues we're dealing with are some of the migrants that are being brought into the nation and then shipped off into various strange places. Some of them, because not every one of them finds a place to live and some of them get lost, end up being homeless and they're not even from this country. California's homeless crisis is a little bit different, where many people in California who are unhoused are actually Californians who have just fallen on hard times, lost something, and can't get back on top. It's a very deep, very disturbing, it's just hard to fathom homelessness is hard to fathom on its own, but the fact that the folks in California are dealing with a crisis, it's not just people from Arizona, people from New York, people from Texas who have just kind of wandered into California to try to find better, greener pastures. It's people from California who've lost their green pastures and can't find a way back up. You should click on the link for this story and read it because it's a very, very, very deep one. This is also one of those that popped up during the weekend that was extremely eyeball catching. So many of you already saw this one. The biggest issue was, yes, we had a roller coaster, a crash in Sweden. And yes, there was a war in Russia that wasn't a war. And yes, Jennifer Lawrence is going to strike with the Actors Guild. Some more eye-catching and more, shiny object-like stories caught attention to this one. That's usually what happens for the Almost Relevant Story of the Week. So that's usually how this thing goes. This one was one that really was heartbreaking when I read it through it, and was one I had to put in there and see what it go. But it got basically no response. So it didn't even get enough response to not be talked about. It got no response whatsoever, and that's why we're talking about it. But we're done talking about this one and all the stories we had for the past week. The week ending July the 1st, 2023. We're in the 7th month, 6 months down, 6 more to go. Yes, it is. Be prepared for a great weekend of stuff, or a great week, I should say, as the 4th of July holiday falls on a Tuesday. Canada, you go ahead and get this party started earlier because Canada Day is the 1st of July. So happy Canada Day. There you go. We're going to be working all the holidays, Canada Day and the 4th of July and the day before 4th of July, plus Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're not going to take any time off for this project because it kind of needs to be done, and I'm the main person doing it, so it's there. But we also have other things going on for the weekend, as we're going to produce in just a bit, once I'm done editing this thing up, the Story of the Week podcast. And the Story of the Week podcast, your tease for that is we're dealing with the story that was at number 8 this week. That headline reads, Violent protests in Paris suburb after teen is shot dead by police during traffic stop. We're going to use that headline to get things started. We're going to go deeper into the story of 5 weeks of unrest in Paris over an incident that here in the States, while has not been all that frequent lately, and sometimes way too frequent, basically always way too frequent. But we're going to deal with how the Parisians are dealing with what we have dealt with here for some time. With that, reminders that our feeds on Facebook, facebook.com/This Is a Conversation Project, and Twitter, twitter.com/TH_conversation, are there all day, all night, every 50 minutes, posting news stories for you to engage in, to tell us what to chat about in our daily engagements and the weekend engagements. And just be good people. Stay hydrated, stay limber, stay on task. Long life ahead we are expecting for all of you, so be with us as long as you can. Reminders that if you are in need, you can call or text the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. It's that simple, from your cell phone. Also 988lifeline.org online, available 24/7. That is obviously the website, but the cell phone activity for your cell phone. English and Spanish speakers there for you all the time. Thank you so much for joining us. And what stories will be the top 10 this week that you will gather over and just pour throughout the week to tell us what was the most engaging stories? We'll find out next week for the weekly wrap-up with Jay Cleveland Payne from The Conversation Project.